In the previous lesson, we talked about the different types of word or kalima. And in talking about kalima, we learned that any meaningful word, which is called mawdu', has two categories, mufrad and murakkab. Now we already talked about mufrad and all of its categories and subcategories. So in this video, we'll be talking about murakkab and we'll be talking about all the different types of murakkabs. Now to begin with, there are two types of murakkabs. Murakkab mufid and murakkab ghayr mufid. Murakkabun mufidun is also known as murakkabun tammun, jumlatun mufidatun, and kalamun tammun. And most of the time it's just called kalamun. This is basically a complete sentence. Murakkabun ghayru mufidin, on the other hand, is also known as murakkabun naqisun, jumlatun ghayru mufidatin, kalamun naqisun, and this is basically an incomplete sentence or a phrase. So these are the basic two types of murakkab. They're both compounds. They're both a bunch of words grouped together. The only difference between the first and the second one is that the first one is a complete sentence which conveys a complete meaning, whereas the second one is not a legitimate sentence. It's an incomplete sentence. It's just a phrase of a sentence. So from now on, if I say sentence, I'm talking about murakkab mufid, and if I say phrase, I'm talking about murakkab ghayr mufid. Make sure to keep that in mind. Now you need to know that sentences or murakkab mufid, which is the first type here, has two types. And phrases, meaning murakkab ghayr mufid, which is the second type, has 5 of its own types. First, let's talk about the types of sentences, meaning murakkab mufid. In Arabic, there are two types of sentences, jumla khabariyah and jumla insha'iyah. Jumlatun khabariyatun is basically a sentence which has the possibility of being true or false. And jumlatun insha'iyatun is that sentence which does not have the possibility of being true or false. So what does that mean? What does it mean by having the possibility of being true and false? What it means is that there are some sentences about which you can say that, oh, that's true, or oh, that's not true, that's false. For example, if you say, I helped Zaid, somebody could come up and say, true, I saw you helping Zaid. Or somebody could come up and say, that is so wrong, you'd never help Zaid, or something like that. So the sentence you articulated has the potential of being true or false. Now these kinds of sentences which have the possibility of being true or false are called jumla khabariyah, because they give you a khabar. They give you news about someone or something. And then obviously there are the other sentences which do not have the possibility of being true or false. For example, if you go up to somebody and ask him, do you know which way the masjid is? Now that's not a sentence where someone can say true, or hey, that is an incorrect statement, because a question doesn't have the possibility of being true or false. A question can't be defined by being true or false because it's not giving news about anything. So all of these types of sentences which do not have the possibility of being true or false, all of them fall under the category of jumlatun insha'iyatun. So now first let's talk about jumla khabariyah, the first type. Jumlatun khabariyatun has two types, jumla ismiyah khabariyah and jumla fi'liyah khabariyah. The first one, jumlatun ismiyatun khabariyah, is basically a nominal sentence or a sentence that begins with a noun. And the second one, jumlatun fi'liyatun khabariyatun, is basically a sentence which begins with a verb, not with a noun. First, let's focus on the first one, jumla ismiyah khabariyah. What is the definition of a jumlatun ismiyatun khabariyah? It is that sentence which begins with a noun. The second part of the sentence can be a noun or a verb. The first part of the sentence is called mubtada, subject, or it's called musnad ilay, the word about which information is being given. The second part of the sentence is called khabar, predicate, or it's called musnad, the word giving the information. The mubtada is generally ma'rifah, meaning definite, and the khabar is generally nakira, indefinite. Now ma'rifah, definite, basically means that either there's the phrase the attached to a word, or it's the name of a person, place, or thing. Nakira means it doesn't have any of those qualities. There's no the coming before it, nor is it the name of a person, place, or thing. And the second thing you need to know is that both of them, meaning both the mubtada and the khabar, are going to be marfu' in a jumlatun ismiyatun khabariyah, in a nominal sentence. Marfu' means there's going to be a dhamma on the last letter of both the mubtada and the khabar. Let's take an example. Al-baytu nadhifun. The house is clean. In this sentence, notice that the first part of the sentence, al-baytu, is the mubtada, the subject, also known as musnad ilay, and the second part of the sentence, which is nadhifun, is khabar, predicate, also known as musnad, the word giving the information. Also note that the mubtada, which is al-bayt, is ma'rifah because it's mubtada, and mubtada is generally ma'rifah because of that alif lam coming before it, which gives the meaning of the. It's making it definite. You know the house the person is talking about. And the second part, the predicate, which is nadhifun, is nakira. There's no alif lam coming before it. And also note, lastly, that both of them are marfu'. There's a dhamma on the last letter of al-bayt, and there are two dhammas on the last letter of nadhif. The gist is al-bayt is mubtada and nadhifun is khabar. So both of them become jumlatun ismiyatun khabariyah. Another thing to note is that a sentence may have more than one khabar. For example, الرجل طويل قوي. Here, الرجل is the mubtada. طويل is the first khabar, and قوي is the second khabar. So here, mubtada plus first khabar plus second khabar equals jumla ismiya khabariyah. So this was talking about jumla ismiya khabariyah, nominal sentence. Now let's move on to the second type of jumla khabariyah, which is jumla fi'liyah khabariyah, verbal sentences. Jumla fi'liyah khabariyah is that sentence which begins with a verb. The first part of the sentence is called fi'l or musnad. The second part is called fa'il or musnad ilay, which means doer, and is always marfu'. Marfu' means the last letter of that word will always get a dhamma. If the verb is transitive, meaning that it requires an object, then a maf'ul by the way means object, a maf'ul will be added and it will be mansub. Mansub meaning that the last letter of that word will have a nasab, will have a fatha. Let's take an example. Jalasa Zaydun. Zayd sat. Now since this is a sentence which begins with a verb, jalasa, it is jumla fi'liyah khabariyah. So the first part of the sentence, which is jalasa, is called fi'l or musnad. The second part of the sentence, which is Zaydun in this pretext, is called fa'il, the doer, or musnad ilay, the person about whom information is being given, and which is always marfu', meaning it has a dhamma coming on the last letter, which is dal in this context. This is an example of jalasa, which is al-fi'lul lazim, an intransitive verb. Because for sitting, you don't need an object, but for other verbs which are intransitive or which are transitive, you need objects. Let's take a transitive verb. For example, khalaqa, to create, because when you create something, you need to have an object that is to be created. So let's give you another example with khalaqa, which is a transitive verb. خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاءَ. Allah created the sky. Here, khalaqa is the fi'l. Allahu is the fa'il. And as-sama'a is the maf'ul. Fi'l plus fa'il plus maf'ul equals jumla fi'liyah khabariyah. This is an example of jumla fi'liyah khabariyah, and before this we covered jumla ismiyah khabariyah. Both of them, jumla ismiyah khabariyah and jumla fi'liyah khabariyah, are types of jumla khabariyah. Now let's move on to Jumla Insha'iyya, because we learned previously that there are two types of sentences, Jumla Khabariyya, and we covered the two types of Jumla Khabariyya. Now we move on to Jumla Insha'iyya. Jumla Insha'iyya has 10 types, and we're quickly going to go over all of these 10 types. Keep in mind that these are all the types of sentences about which you cannot really say that they are either true or false. What you see on the screen here are the 10 types of Jumla Insha'iyya. The first type of Jumla Insha'iyya is Al-Amr, positive command. For example, idrib, hit. Now a positive command, whether it is positive or negative, for example the second one, An-Nahi, cannot be said to be true or false. And the second one is An-Nahyu, negative command. For example, La tadrib, don't hit. Number 3 is Al-Istifham, question. For example, Hal daraba Zaydun, did Zayd hit? The fourth one is At-Tamanni, which means desire. Any phrase which shows any type of desire. For example, Layta Shababa Ya'ud, I wish youth would return. Number 5 is At-Taraji, any phrase which describes hope. For example, لَعَلَّ الْإِمْتِحَانَ سَهْلٌ, I hope the exam is easy. Number 6 is An-Nida, exclamation, when you call someone, for example. For example, Ya Allah, O Allah. Number 7 is Al-Ard, which means either request or an offer. For example, Ala ta'tini, so this is a request, saying, will you not come to me? Meaning, can you come? And number 8 is Al-Qasam, oath. For example, Wallahi, by Allah. Number 9 is At-Ta'ajjub, amazement. This is basically an exclamation, but any phrase which shows amazement is included in At-Ta'ajjub. For example, Ma ahsana Zaydun, how good Zayd is. And finally, number 10, we have Al-Uqud, which means transactions. Now this means transactional statements. For example, Bi'tu hadha, I sold this. Or Ishtaraytu hadha, I bought this. Now the thing you'll notice with uqud or transactional statements is basically that they're apparently khabariyah, because they're giving information about the fact that you or someone bought something or sold something. So that's a khabar. But they are insha'iyah in the sense that they cannot be said to be false, because you have to understand that in Islam, if you say I bought this to the seller, or you say I sold this to you, to the buyer, the contract is done. You can't come up later and say, oh, I was just joking, or I was messing around. Because Islam doesn't recognize transactional statements to be false. If it was said to be khabariyah, someone could just say I was joking and get away with fraud. So, to make these transactions unable to be nullified, Islam recognizes them to be insha'iyah instead of khabariyah. So that's why al-uqud or transactional statements are included in Jumla Insha'iyah in the books of Nahw. So these are the 10 types of Jumla Insha'iyah, and we already covered the 2 types of Jumla Khabariyah, which is Jumla Ismiyah Khabariyah and Jumla Fi'aliyah Khabariyah. And since we're done with Jumla Khabariyah and Jumla Insha'iyah, which in turn are the subcategories of Jumla Mufida or Murakkab Mufid, now we go on to Murakkab Ghayr Mufid. Because we're done with sentences, now we move on to phrases, Murakkab Ghayr Mufid. And as said before, phrases have 5 types, and we'll cover each one in detail. These are the 5 types of Al-Murakkab-un-Naqis, or the 5 types of phrases. The first one shown here is Al-Murakkabu-Tawsifi, which means descriptive phrase. This is a phrase in which one word describes the other. For example, this word here itself, Al-Murakkabu-Tawsifi, in itself is a descriptive phrase. Or to give you another example, Al-Baytun-Nadhifu, the clean house. That's clean is describing the house, so that's a descriptive phrase. The second type of al-murakkabun-naqis is al-murakkabul-idafi, possessive phrase, in which one thing is shown to be the possessor of another thing. For example, the man's donkey. So that shows that the man is the possessor of that donkey. Number 3 is al-murakkabul-ishari, demonstrative phrase. Now what this means is that there's a phrase in which one word indicates towards another. For example, if you say this man or that book, the this or that is indicating towards the book or the man. So that's a demonstrative phrase. Number 4 is al-murakkabul adadi, also known as al-murakkabul bina'i. This is a numerical phrase. Numerical phrase meaning it talks about numbers. For example, 18. So in Arabic, you don't have one single number for any word after 9 or any word after 10. In fact, you have the combination of 2 words. So those two words make up that numerical phrase, and we will talk about that later on. And finally, the fifth one is al-murakkabu man'u sarf, indeclinable phrase. This is a phrase in which two words are joined together to form one single word, and we'll talk about that later as well. So now let's get started with the details of the first one, which is al-murakkabu tawsifi, or descriptive phrase. Al-murakkabu tawsifi means descriptive phrase. What is a descriptive phrase? It's a phrase in which one word describes the other. The describing word or adjective is called sifa. The thing being described is called mawsuf. The mawsuf and sifa must correspond in four things, meaning they have to be equal in all four of these aspects. The first one is i'rab. I'rab means the harakah, the last letter of a word gets, is called i'rab. So what that means is that the last letter of both mawsuf and sifa have to be the same. Either both of them get a dhamma, either both of them get a fatha, or both of them get a kasra. But they have to be the exact same in terms of i'rab. The second thing they have to be the same in terms of is gender, being masculine or feminine. If the mawsuf is masculine, the sifa also has to be masculine. And on the other hand, if the mawsuf is feminine, the sifa also has to be feminine in accordance with the mawsuf. Number 3 is number, being singular, dual, or plural. If the mawsuf is singular, dual, or plural, the sifa has to go in accordance with that. The sifa will be changed to singular, dual, or plural in accordance with the mawsuf. And finally, number 4 is being ma'rifah, meaning definite, or nakira, being indefinite. So definite basically means either it has the word alif lam, meaning the attached to it, which shows that it is definite, it's something that is already definite in your mind, or it's indefinite, nakira, meaning that it could be any random thing in the world. So if the mawsuf, for example, is definite, meaning it's the name of a person, place, or thing, or it's a pronoun, or it's something you know in the back of your mind, the sifa also has to get an alif lam and it has to be definite. On the other hand, if the mawsuf is nakira, it's indefinite, the sifa will also stay indefinite. Let's take an example. Rajulun salihun, a pious man. Here, rajulun is mawsuf, is the person being described. Salihun is the adjective, it's the sifa which is describing rajulun. Now notice that rajulun and salihun, the mawsuf and sifa, both are corresponding in all four aspects mentioned above. The first thing is i'rab. So rajulun is getting 2 dhammas on the lam. So in accordance with that, salihun is also getting 2 dhammas in accordance with the rajulun. Number 2 is gender. Since rajulun is masculine, salihun is also masculine. And number 3 is number. Since rajulun is singular, salihun is also singular. And finally, number 4 being ma'rifah and nakira. So rajulun in this case is nakira, a man, a pious man. So since rajulun is nakira, salihun is also nakira. Let's give you another example. Al-bintu al-aqilatu. Here, al-bint means the girl. Al-aqilah means intelligent. Al-bintu al-aqilah, the intelligent girl or the smart girl. So here the person being described is the girl, al-bintu, so that becomes the mawsuf. Al-aqilah is the adjective or the word describing, which is sifa. Again, notice that mawsuf and sifa both here are corresponding in all four aspects. The first is i'rab, so since al-bintu is getting a dhamma on the last letter, al-aqilatu is also getting a dhamma on the last letter. Number 2 is gender. Since al-bint is feminine, al-aqilatu automatically becomes feminine. It's not al-aqilu, it's aqilatu. Number 3 is number, being singular, dual, or plural. So since al-bint is singular, al-aqilah is also singular. And finally being ma'rifah, because al-bint here has an alif lam which makes it definite, the girl. So therefore, aqilah also gets an alif lam which makes it definite. So you made the sifat definite in accordance with the mawsuf, which is also definite. Now this is all you need to know about al-murakkabu tawsifi, a descriptive phrase. That was the first type of al-murakkabu naqis. Now let's jump on to the second type, which is al-murakkabu idafi, or possessive phrase. The second type of al-murakkabu naqis is al-murakkabu idafi, which means possessive phrase. Al-murakkabu idafi is basically a phrase in which one word is attributed to another word. The word that is attributed is called mudaf, and the word which it is attributed towards is called mudaf ilayh. In most cases, this means that the second word owns or possesses the first word. The mudaf never gets an alif lam or a tanween. Remember that mudaf is the first word, which in most cases is the person or thing being possessed. The i'rab of the mudaf, on the other hand, will be according to the word governing it. Now let's take an example. Here we have a sentence, or actually we have a phrase, Kitabu Zaydin, Zayd's book. Here kitab is the mudaf and Zayd is the mudaf ilayh. Now notice that in this phrase, Kitabu Zaydin, the word kitab is attributed towards the word Zayd, Zayd's book. Also notice that the word which is attributed, meaning kitab, is called mudaf, and the person towards which that book is attributed towards is Zayd, that's mudaf ilayh. And as you can see that this is a possessive phrase because it shows that Zayd is the one who owns the kitab. It shows that the mudaf is being owned by the mudaf ilayh. That's how it normally is. And one more thing to note here is that the mudaf never gets an alif lam or a tanween. So you can never ever say al-kitabu Zaydin. Neither can you say kitabun Zaydin. Another thing is that the mudaf ilayh is always majroor. So Zaydin, as you can see, which is the mudaf ilayh, is getting a kasra or a jar on the last letter, which is dal. And as for the i'rab of the mudaf, kitab, that will be according to the word governing it. Right now we're just bringing it by default. There's no amil, there's no particle that is coming before it. So that's why it's going to get the default harakah, which is dhamma. But if it was governed by a word coming before it, and let me give you an example of that. Here we have wajadtu kitaba Zaydin, which means I found Zayd's book. In this case, wajadtu constitutes the fi'l plus the fa'il. Kitab is mudaf and Zayd is mudaf ilayh. And then kitaba Zaydin, mudaf and mudaf ilayh, when you combine them together, they become the maf'ul of wajadtu together. Now what I really want to point out in using this example is that when you see the phrase kitaba Zaydin, you notice that Zayd is the mudaf ilayh, and because it's a mudaf ilayh, it's getting a jar. It's majroor. But kitab, which is mudaf, as I said, will be according to the word governing it. So the i'rab of kitab, the i'rab of ba, the last letter in kitab, will be in accordance with wajadtu, because that's the word governing it. And since it's coming as a maf'ul, and a maf'ul always gets a nasab or a fatha, kitab will also get a fatha. So the end result will be وجدت كتاب زيد. I found Zaid's book. So these are the basics you need to know about al-murakkab al-idafi or possessive phrase. But there are 3 more notes that I want to share with you that are very important. Sometimes many mudaf and mudaf ilayh are found in one single phrase. For example, here we have a phrase of many mudaf and mudaf ilayh coupled together. Miftahu babi bayti rajuli, which means the man's house's door's key. So you're going to translate it backwards. The man's house's door's key. Also, when you start analyzing the sentence to find out which is the mudaf and which is the mudaf ilayh, etc., you're going to start from the end. Always start from the backwards when it comes to mudaf and mudaf ilayh phrases. Here, the last word is ar-rajul. What is ar-rajul? It's a mudaf ilayh. Bayt, on the other hand, is also a mudaf ilayh of the word bab, but right now we are going from the back. We're starting from the back. So we're going to look at bayt in relation to ar-rajul. Bayt in relation to ar-rajul is a mudaf because it's the object being possessed by ar-rajul. So bayt for right now is going to be termed as mudaf. Now when you look at the third word from the back, bab, bab also becomes a mudaf ilayh of miftah, but in relation to bayt ar-rajul it becomes a mudaf because it's the thing being attributed to the guy's house. The question is bab the mudaf of bayt only or ar-rajul or both together? The answer is bab is the mudaf of bayt and ar-rajul combined. When bab is a mudaf of bayt ar-rajul, the whole thing together becomes the mudaf ilayh for bab. Now we look at the first word, which is miftah. And we know right away that since miftah is the first word coming in the sentence or in the phrase, miftah is going to be the mudaf of babi bayt ar-rajul. And miftah is the mudaf of the whole thing coming after, babi bayt ar-rajul. So therefore, the whole babu bayt ar-rajul has to be the mudaf ilayh of miftah. So now you connect bab, which is the mudaf right now, and you connect bayt ar-rajul, which is the mudaf ilayh, and both mudaf and mudaf ilayh both become the mudaf ilayh of miftah, which is mudaf. And obviously in the end, when you connect miftah, which is the mudaf, and babi bayt ar-rajul, which is the mudaf ilayh, you connect both of them and you get what you get, al-murakkab al-idafi. This is an example of having many mudaf ilayh coupled together in one single phrase. And this is how you would analyze this type of phrase. Now let's move on to the second note. If the sifah of a mudaf is brought, it should come immediately after the mudaf ilayh with an alif lam and should have the same i'rab as that of the mudaf. Again, if you want to bring out an adjective of the mudaf, you want to describe the mudaf, the thing which is being possessed, number one, it should come immediately after the mudaf ilayh. Not after the mudaf, but after the mudaf ilayh. Second thing you need to know is that the sifa will have an alif lam before it. Third thing to note is that it should have the same i'rab as that of the mudaf, so that you know that it is an adjective of the mudaf and not of the mudaf ilayh. Let's take an example. You want to say the house's new door. Here, the thing being possessed, the mudaf, is the door, and the thing that is possessing it is the house. So that's the mudaf ilayh. New is the sifa, the adjective of door, which is mudaf. So you're bringing the sifa of a mudaf, you're attributing new to the door. So the first thing you need to keep in mind is that it should come immediately after the mudaf ilayh. So whatever new is in Arabic, it's going to come after you bring the house. Second thing, new is going to have an alif lam before it. Third thing is going to have the same i'rab as that of door in Arabic. Let's see that in Arabic itself. In Arabic, this would be babul baytil jadidu. Here, bab is the mudaf and al-bayt is the mudaf ilayh. And al-jadid is the sifa of the mudaf bab, the new door. Here you can see that al-jadid, which is the sifa of the mudaf bab, is coming right immediately after the mudaf ilayh. The second thing is that al-jadid is getting an alif lam, and it's getting the same i'rab as that of the mudaf, because bab is the mudaf and it has a dhamma, so therefore al-jadid is also getting a dhamma. If al-jadid was the sifa of al-bayt, then it would have got a kasra, and it would be al-jadidi. So this is the case if you want to bring a sifa for a mudaf. What happens if you want to bring a sifa for the mudaf ilayh? If the sifa of a mudaf ilayh is brought, it should come immediately after the mudaf ilayh. Same thing as in the mudaf. And it should correspond to the mudaf ilayh in the four aspects mentioned previously, which are i'rab, gender, number, ma'rifah, or nakira. I'rab meaning the harakah, meaning that if the mudaf, whatever harakah the mudaf ilayh gets, that's the harakah its sifa is going to get. And it has to correspond in terms of gender as well, meaning if the mudaf ilayh is feminine or masculine, that's how the sifa is going to be. And also the number. The sifa is going to be dual, plural, or singular in accordance with the mudaf ilayh. And also it should be ma'rifah or nakira based on what the mudaf ilayh is. Now let's take an example. The example you see here on the screen is pretty similar to the one mentioned in the previous slide, Babul Baytil Jadidi. The only difference is that here the sifa is of the mudaf ilayh, not of the mudaf. So this means the new door's house. The new door's house. So Bab is the mudaf, Al-Bayt is the mudaf ilayh, and Al-Jadid is the sifa of Al-Bayt. The way you're going to analyze this sentence is backwards again, because Al-Bayt al-Jadid in itself is a mawsuf and a sifa. Al-Bayt is the mawsuf and Al-Jadid is the sifa. So you write that down first. And then together, when you have the whole combination of mawsuf sifa, the combination of Al-Bayt al-Jadid, that whole thing in itself together becomes the mudaf ilayh of Bab. And Bab is obviously the mudaf. Together, Bab, which is the mudaf, and Al-Bayt al-Jadid, which is the mudaf ilayh, both become al-Murakkabul idafi. So there you go. That's an example of a mudaf ilayh having a sifa. So we covered al-Murakkabut tawsifi, and now we covered al-Murakkabul idafi. Now let's move on to the third type of al-Murakkabun naqis, which is al-Murakkabul ishari, demonstrative phrase. Al-Murakkabul ishari means demonstrative phrase. Al-Murakkabul ishari is a phrase in which one noun points towards another noun. Now, so this demonstrative phrase has two parts. One is the noun which is pointing towards something, and one is the noun which is being pointed towards. The noun that is pointing is called ismul ishara. And the noun which is being pointed towards is called musharun ilayh. The musharun ilayh, meaning the thing being pointed towards, must have an alif lam, because if it doesn't have an alif lam, then it's going to be a complete sentence. Let me give you an example. Here we have a phrase, هذا الرجل, this man. So هذا is the ismul ishara, is the noun which is pointing towards the man. Ar-rajul is the musharun ilayh, is the thing or person being pointed towards. This is an example of al-Murakkabul ishari. Now, as I said before, the musharun ilayh must have an alif lam. So here we see that the musharun ilayh, which is ar-rajul, has an alif lam preceding it. If there was no alif lam, then it would have been a complete sentence. For example, if you took the same example, هذا الرجل, and you took the alif lam out of ar-rajulu, then it would be هذا رجل. This is a man. So now that would be a complete sentence. So you can see the difference here. The first one was هذا الرجل, which meant this man. That's al-Murakkabun naqis. It's an incomplete phrase or sentence. هذا رجل, on the other hand, is a complete sentence. This is a man, and this is mubtada khabar. هذا would be mubtada, رجل would be khabar. And هذا الرجل, هذا would be اسم الإشارة, الرجل would be مشار إليه, and together they would become المركب الناقص or المركب الإشاري. So after المركب التوصيفي and المركب الإضافي, this was the third type, المركب الإشاري. Now let's move on to the fourth one, which is المركب البنائي or المركب العددي. المركب البنائي or المركب العددي means numerical phrase. المركب العددي or المركب البنائي is a phrase in which two numerals, meaning numbers, are joined together to form a single word. There are only 9 numerical phrases, and these are the numbers 11 to 19 in Arabic. Let me note them down for you. These are the 9 المركب البنائي or المركب العدديز. 11 means 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, and finally 19, 19. Now each of these actually had a wa between them, meaning before 11 was actually ahadun wa ashrun, 12 was ithnani wa ashrun, and 13 was thalathun wa ashrun, 14 was arba'un wa ashrun, and so on. So all of them, what they did was they took the waw out and they joined the two words together. They joined ahada and ashara together to make these numerical phrases, to make these al-murakkab al-adadis. Also note that both parts of each al-murakkab al-adadi or al-murakkab al-bina'i will be maftuh, no matter where they come, in the middle of a sentence, in the beginning of a sentence, or in the end of the sentence. So ahada ashara will remain ahada ashara. It will never be ahadu asharu or ahadi ashari. It's always going to be ahada ashara. No matter what comes, whether it's a fa'il, whether it's a maf'ul, whether it's a mubtada or a khabar, it's always going to be ahada ashara. And same thing goes for all of them. The only exception is ithna ashara, 12, which is this one right here, ithna ashara. In ithna ashara, the second part, which is ashara, will always be maftuh. It will never change. Ashara here will never change. But ithna, which is the first part of the sentence, will change. If it is supposed to deserve a rafa'a, meaning it comes in halatul rafa', then it's going to stay as ithna ashar. And by the way, halatul rafa' basically means it comes in any position where it gets the haraka of rafa', meaning dhamma. For example, it's a mubtada or a khabar or a fa'il, then it's going to stay as ithna. But if it comes in halatul nasab or halatul jar, meaning it comes in a position where it's supposed to get a kasra, for example, it comes after a harful jar, or it comes in halatul nasab, meaning it comes as a maf'ul or something else in which it's supposed to get a nasab or a fatha, then it's going to transform into ithnay ashara. Now let me give you some examples of halatul rafa and halatul nasab and halatul jar, so you understand properly. This is an example of halatul rafa. Ja'a ithna ashara rajulan. Ithna ashara is the fa'il of ja'a. Ja'a means to come. So ja'a ithna ashara rajulan means 12 men came. So since ithna ashar is a fa'il and therefore in halatul rafa, it's going to stay as ithna ashar. Now let's take an example of halatul nasab or halatul jar. This is an example of halatul jar. Marartu bi ithnay ashara rajulan, or marartu bi ithnay ashara rajulan. I passed by 12 men. Here, ithna ashar, ithnay ashar is coming as a majroor because it's coming right after bi, which is harful jar. And we know that any word that comes after bi, which is harful jar, gets a jar. So therefore, ithna ashar is in halatul jar. So when it's in halatul jar, it's going to be ithnay ashara, not ithna ashara. Now let's take an example of halatul nasab. This is an example of halatul nasab. Ra'aytu ithnay ashara rajulan. I saw, ra'aytu means I saw 12 men. So now ra'aytu constitutes the fa'il and the fa'il, and ithnay ashara rajulan together becomes the maf'ul. So therefore, since it's maf'ul and a maf'ul is always in halatul nasab, ithna ashar is going to transform into ithnay ashar, as you can see on the screen. So this is all you needed to know about al-murakkab al-adadi and al-murakkab al-bina'i, which was the fourth one. Now we jump on to the final al-murakkab al-naqis, which is al-murakkab man'u al-sarf. Al-murakkab man'u al-sarf means indeclinable phrase. Al-murakkab man'u al-sarf is a phrase in which two words are joined together to form a single word. The first part of this phrase is always maftuh, meaning it always gets a fatha. And the second part of the phrase, its i'rab changes according to the word governing it. An example of al-murakkab man'u al-sarf would be hadara maut. Hadara maut is actually a phrase in which two words are joined to form a single word. The first word here is hadara, the second one is maut. Hadara maut, by the way, is the name of a region in Yemen. And the first word hadara means it became present. Maut means death. So hadara maut means death became present. And the reason it's called hadara maut is that it was the place where there was a chief named Amir bin Qahtan, and he lived there and he was extremely ruthless, especially when it came to his enemies. And so he would kill them left and right. He was very ruthless. So whenever he would show up, people would say hadara maut or hadara al-maut, death is here. And later on, the place where he lived somehow began to be called hadara maut. So hadara maut is basically one example of murakkab man'u al-sarf, in which two words are joined to form just one single word. And as you said in the notes, the first part of the phrase is always maftuh. So the first part, which is hadara, is, as you can see, maftuh. The second part, mautu, the i'rab of maut will change according to the word governing it. So if it comes as a fa'il, it's going to have a dhamma, as it has right now. If it comes as a maf'ul, it's going to have a fatha, hadara mauta. For example, if you say ra'aytu hadara maut, I saw hadara maut, then that would come in the place of halatun nasab, that would be a maf'ul. And if it's supposed to get a jar, it would be hadara mauti. Another example of al-murakkab man'u al-sarf would be Ba'labak. Ba'labak is actually a city in Lebanon. And this is actually Baalbek in English. In English it's called B-A-L-B-E-K, Baalbek. But in Arabic it's called Ba'labak, and that's the original. So Ba'labak here, as you can see, is actually the compendium or combination of two words. One is Ba'al, the other is Bak. Now Baal was the name of an idol and Bak was the name of a king. Now there are different views on why it's called Ba'labak. But the gist is that it was a place where there was an idol named Baal and there was a king named Bak. So that's why it's called Ba'labak. So this is another example of al-murakkab man'u al-sarf, where two words are joined together to form one single word. And this is the last type of al-murakkab al-naqis. We covered al-murakkab al-tawsifi, al-murakkab al-idafi, al-murakkab al-ishari, then al-murakkab al-bina'i, also known as al-murakkab al-adadi, and finally we came to the fifth one, which is al-murakkab man'u al-sarf. All of these are the five types of al-murakkab al-naqis, which are incomplete sentences or phrases. And so these phrases can be used to form a complete sentence if they are used within a sentence. For example, if you take this one, Ba'labak, and you say, Ra'aytu Ba'labak. Now that becomes a complete sentence. It means I saw Ba'labak. So now we are done with all the different types of murakkabat. And I finally just have three final notes to share with you. Sometimes the khabar is not mentioned. In this case, when the khabar is not mentioned clearly, then it will be regarded as muqaddar, hidden. Let me give you an example. Al-imamu fil masjidi. The imam is in the masjid. Now the khabar here is hidden because you don't know what the imam is in the masjid. The imam is what in the masjid? What it means to say is that the imam is present in the masjid. Present in Arabic is hadirun. So that will be seen to be muqaddar, hidden. And when you analyze the sentence, you'll actually bring out the hadirun, which is muqaddar. So here, the first thing we have is al-imam, which by the way is mubtada. Then we have hadirun, which is the khabarun muqaddarun. And then we have fi, which is harful jar. And finally we have al-masjid, which is al-majroor. Now what you do is you join the harful jar and al-majroor and you make them the muta'alliq or the connected thing of hadirun, and you call it muta'alliqu hadirun. And so together, mubtada, the khabar muqaddar, and the muta'alliq of hadir, all three of them become jumlah ismiya khabariya. Now one more note and we'll be done with the lesson. The khabar can be a complete sentence. For example, Zaydun abuhu alimun. Literally this means Zayd, his father, is knowledgeable. And what it means to say in proper words is Zayd's father is knowledgeable. Here as you can see, Zayd is the mubtada and abuhu alimun, that whole thing is the khabar. But obviously we need to analyze that sentence in itself first. Abuhu alimun. Now abuhu is the mubtada and it's a combination of mudaf and mudaf ilayh. Abu is mudaf, hu is mudaf ilayh. Together, abuhu, mudaf and mudaf ilayh become the mubtada of alimun. And alimun becomes the khabar of abuhu mubtada. Now you combine abuhu mubtada and alimun, which is khabar, and the combination of that mubtada khabar becomes a khabar of the mubtada of Zaydun. So there you have it. Zayd is mubtada, abuhu alimun is the khabar. But abuhu alimun in itself is a complete sentence. That's what I was saying. The khabar itself can sometimes be a complete sentence. And finally, when you join the mubtada and the khabar, they become jumla ismiya khabariya. Let me give you another example. Zaydun akala at-ta'ama. Zayd ate the food. Here, Zayd is the mubtada, akala at-ta'ama in itself is the khabar. So first, let's term Zayd as the mubtada. Next, we move on to akala at-ta'ama, and we notice that akala at-ta'ama in itself is a complete sentence. It means he ate the food. So akala first is the fi'l plus the fa'il, and at-ta'am is the maf'ul. And finally, fi'l plus fa'il plus maf'ul all together becomes the khabar of Zaydun mubtada. So notice that when we looked at akala at-ta'am, we had a whole fi'l fa'il maf'ul combination, and that itself was a complete jumla fi'liya khabariya. But then when we looked at the whole sentence and we included Zayd, Zayd was the mubtada and akala at-ta'am became khabar. So now mubtada khabar combined become jumla ismiya khabariya. And this is the end of the lesson. The lesson is done. But before I end off the video, I just want to give you a brief sketch of what we covered in this lesson so you get a holistic view of what just happened in the past 45 to 50 minutes. First, we talked about al-murakkab. And then we saw that al-murakkab had two types. We had al-murakkabul mufid and we had al-murakkabu ghayrul mufid. Next, we looked at al-murakkabul mufid, and we saw that al-murakkabul mufid or jumlah mufida, also known as jumlah mufida, had two types, jumlah khabariyah and jumlah insha'iyah. Next, we looked at jumlah khabariyah and we saw that jumlah khabariyah had two types, jumlah ismiyah khabariyah and jumlah fi'liyah khabariyah. When we looked at jumlah insha'iyah, we found out that jumlah insha'iyah had 10 types. Al-amr, al-nahi, al-istifham, al-tamanni, al-taraji, al-nida, al-ard, al-qasam, al-ta'ajjub, al-uqud. And I'm sorry, it kind of got cramped up in there all the way at the bottom. And so those are the 10 types of jumla insha'iyah. And that's where all the categories of al-murakkab al-mufid are complete. When we looked at al-murakkab ghayr al-mufid, or incomplete sentences and phrases, we found out that it had 5 main types. المركب التوصيفي, المركب الإضافي, المركب الإشاري, المركب البنائي, also known as المركب العددي, and المركب منع الصرف. And that's basically pretty much what we covered in this video. Hope to see you in the next video.